I think we all have that one game or piece of media that lives in our head rent-free, and we always look back fondly on. For me, it's this game, Shadow of the Colossus. I remember my first experience with this game pretty vividly, and I'm about to date myself hard because it involves gaming magazines and demo discs. Man, those were the times. Anyway, my dad, back when he used to play video games, would oftentimes come home with new issues of gaming magazines with demo discs, and we would go through all the demos, unless it was for a game that he felt was inappropriate for me to look at. Most of the time, those were horror games. But one day, the disc he brought home contained a demo for a game called Shadow of the Colossus. Didn't know anything about it, but the artwork in the magazine was crazy to me back then. What I would usually do in this situation is I would skim through the magazine looking at the images for everything, and then go read the full magazine later, usually after playing either all of the demos or some of them. The demo for this game didn't really give much in terms of hints, so me and my dad were lost trying to figure out what to do. But the magazine, it turns out, had a little guide in it, but we only read to the point on how to figure out where to go by raising the sword and looking at where the light gathered. We did that, and somehow both of us did not expect there to be a giant waiting for us. I ain't gonna lie, I panicked and got bonked by the first Colossus from off screen while trying to run away. We read the guide in the magazine and learned what to do. Once we defeated it, we were surprised by the choice of music that played. Then we got a trailer showing some locations in the final game and some quick glances at the other Colossi. Needless to say, I begged him to get the full game, which to be fair, he wanted to play it too. I won't lie, I kept playing that demo over and over again and looked at every piece of media I could find for the game. I didn't have good internet at the time, or regular access to a computer, so my knowledge was pretty limited. One of the local game stores had a poster up with the tagline, "Some mountains are scaled, others are slain." Whoever came up with that tagline should have got a raise. That has to be one of the most epic lines for a game about fighting giant stone monsters. When the game came out, we both played it, taking turns trying to figure out each of the Colossi. We did buy the strategy guide, but we tried not to look at it unless we were really stuck. And we did get stuck a few times. Good times. Fun times. It became a game I'd play at least once a year, usually around the holidays. I don't know why I would do that. I just would end up doing that a lot of times. I don't know. But it's one of the few games I'd tried 100% and I've done so multiple times. So today we're going to talk about the game, specifically the original and not the remake. Not that I have anything against the remake, I actually think it's really good. It's just easier for me to capture footage from my PC if I emulate my PS2 copy. Plus, I mean, it's nostalgic to me. I'm already reviewing older games, might as well review the original versions of them. I am gonna warn you right now, I am about to rant for probably well over an hour about this game, because it's one of my favorite games ever. Just hands down. I'm just letting you know up front, I will be glazing the hell out of this thing. I will timestamp the different sections of the video if you want to jump around. You may want to get cozy, because we're going to be here a while. I warned you, let's get into it. Sorry to interrupt the video for a second, but I need to talk to you about something. So, in addition to running a YouTube channel, I'm also an author with 3 books out at the time of making this, and it would really mean a lot if you guys check them out on Amazon. Currently, I have the Renegade series, which has 2 books in it, with a 3rd one in the works. It's a sci-fi action adventure story in the spirit of 90s cartoons and comics. The series follows a team of heroes, each with their own unique abilities, one of them being a sword-wielding, water-bending alien named Ronin. This group, called the Renegades, protect their world from all sorts of threats. The second book, Blackout, has a team following a lead on their arch nemesis, and they end up in their universe's version of Japan. The team find themselves in the crosshairs of a dangerous group of mercenaries and the shadowy group that hired them. As things escalate between them, the mercenaries, and the ones pulling their strings, the entire fate of the island hangs in the balance, as it is plunged into darkness and held hostage with the aid of a powerful weapon called Blackout. If you're looking for something less serious and more whimsical, consider checking out Tales of the Edgeworlds Volume 1. It's a collection of 4 zany, off-the-wall comedy stories set in a broken multiverse, and features characters such as a violent, short-tempered, foul-mouthed, gun-toting space penguin named Edgy, and his crew of oddballs getting into crazy hijinks, involving mutants, space mafias, and vampires, that are also from space. It also includes a story about a dorky, clumsy combat android named Mika 227 that tangles with a feared space pirate captain to save some miners. It also recently got an audiobook, which only amplifies the hilarity in these stories, and it really makes the characters jump off the page with the over-the-top voices that the narrator does. The link to my Amazon page for all 3 books will be in the description and in the pinned comment. Back to the video. So, Shadow of the Colossus is an action-adventure game set in a mysterious land where we control a character named Wander, and we're tasked with finding and defeating 16 giant monsters called Colossi in order to revive a girl named Mono. The Colossi can only be killed with a specific sword that we have, and our only companion is a horse named Agro, and that's our way of getting around because this world is kind of large. The game was developed by Fumito Ueda, who worked at Sony Computer Entertainment's internal studio that got the name Team Ico after their first hit game, named Ico, which this game is a spiritual prequel to. The game is an example of less is more, because the world is very empty. It isn't filled with NPCs and a bunch of side quests that just give you busy work to do. It feels very lonely and isolating and quiet, which works because the game gets loud when you trigger a Colossus encounter. It's a wonderful contrast. The silence and emptiness also gives you a sense that you are somewhere you aren't supposed to be. There are some beautiful places in this game, and sometimes I'll just stop and look around and take a minute to soak it all in. The remake does make the environments look even more beautiful, but there's a lot more to talk about than just the environment. Wander has a couple of moves. You can use the sword, although swinging it isn't something you'll be using much, and you can tell by the way Wander swings it that he isn't used to using a sword. The sword is also important for figuring out where to go, because if you raise it to the sunlight and you head to where the light gathers, that'll take you to the next Colossus. but you can also use that light to show you where their weak points are when you actually get to them. The other main way you'll be using the sword is to stab the sigils that serve as weak points, which are the only ways you can do any significant damage to the Colossi. You can climb on things like fur or moss or vines or ledges, and you'll be doing a lot of climbing and hanging on to things in this game. You also have a bow that has infinite arrows, and you can hold the square button longer to charge up your arrows, making them fly further, and maybe do a little more damage. Oh yeah, you have a stamina meter too. It's that pink circular meter at the bottom next to your health bar. It goes down as you hang on for dear life, swim underwater, or if you spam arrows a bunch. Managing that is important. You can also put all your weapons away, but outside of one instance, it's not useful to do. You can also crouch and roll. Your health regenerates over time. It seems to regenerate faster if you're standing still. There is falling damage, but due to the fact that you are scaling 100-foot tall creatures, the fall damage is very generous. Otherwise, this would be a frustration machine. The other thing you can do is ride on your trusty horse. She is your main method of getting around, and sometimes she's necessary to defeat some of the beasts. She's got some mechanics the game doesn't tell you, like if you pull back on a stick and press the button to make her go, she'll rear up and then take off at full speed right away. You can also hang on the side of the saddle. I didn't even know what the point of that was, but according to the wiki, you can use this to hide from the Colossi. I've never tried that. Another thing you can do that does not serve any purpose in the final game, but just looks cool, is you can stand on the back of the horse while she runs. I'm no horse expert, but I imagine if you did this with a real horse, they would knock you off immediately. But you do look badass though, especially with the sword out. But like I said, it serves zero purpose. Aggro can't die, but she can't be hurt, and she'll limp for a bit after a few seconds if she's caught by a Colossi's attack, and if you're riding on her when it happens, you'll get knocked off. The horse can sometimes be a little unresponsive. Sometimes it feels like she's just magnetizes to certain obstacles on the map and won't turn away from them despite how much you want her to. There's also some places where she will refuse to run no matter how hard you ask her to. Can be a little frustrating. Most of the game, you'll be riding across the Ancient Lands. I'm calling them the Ancient Lands, not the Forbidden Lands, because apparently Forbidden Lands is not the correct name, even though it's the one I think everyone has been using for years, and I only just learned that. But you'll ride across the Ancient Lands, find a Colossus you're supposed to defeat, and then you get transported back to the Central Shrine area, and you'll be assigned your next target. You can't go out of order, even if you go to another Colossi arena. If it's not the one you're meant to fight, it just won't be there. Each boss has their own arena that is blended seamlessly into the map. And there's no loading screens once you've loaded into the map proper. The game will scale up or down the details of parts of the map depending on how close you are to them. And despite the limitations of the PS2's memory, what they were able to achieve with this game is nothing short of incredible. I don't think I can overstate that, especially with the Colossi themselves. The scale of them is incredible, and all the effects that are going off around them, like the billowing sands and the bright light for the desert area, or the effects for the water in the arenas for several of the Colossi, is just chef's kiss. And yes, I am upscaling this to an emulator. My statement still stands. Originally, I was planning on using an HD texture pack made by a person named Sad Origami, but unfortunately, it does not work with the NTSC version of the game, which is what I have emulated here. It only works for the PAL version of the game, but according to their page where they sell texture packs for not just this game, for other games too, an NTSC version is in the works. And just to clarify, when I say sell, I mean like you don't have to pay anything to get the text pack, but you can pay them if you want to as like a donation. Just thought I cleared it up. But last, and certainly not least when it comes to talking about this game's presentation, is that soundtrack. Composed by Kao Otani, it's a masterpiece, man. And Kao Otani has done scores for movies, shows, and other games. If there's any kaiju fans in the audience, he did the soundtrack for 2001's Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. And damn, that is a mouthful of a title. And if you haven't seen that movie, and you like Godzilla, you might want to get on that. Soundtrack for that is also fantastic. He's also done music for the 90s Gamera trilogy, and according to Wikipedia, he even did music for Gundam Wing and its sequel film. They even did music for the anime Outlaw Star. Huh, I noticed that. He's also been the music director and the keyboardist for a band called Dreams Come True. Didn't know that either. Might have to check that out. But as I said, the music he did for Shadow Colossus is beyond beautiful. It's so beautiful, I have a CD from Japan of it, and I listen to it a lot when writing or reading. Seriously, if you haven't listened to it, after you finish watching this video, go give it a listen. You won't regret it. Trust me. Alright, last things to go over in this section are the modes. You have normal mode, and then after you beat the game once, you unlock hard mode and normal time attack. Hard mode does a few changes, mostly that the Colossi hit like a fucking truck. Okay, to be fair, they hit like a truck on normal too, it's just slightly worse on hard mode. Also, some of them have new weak points and take less damage from your attacks. Time attack mode is exactly what it sounds like. You start a game and you can walk up to any Colossi idol and press circle in front of it, and you'll see the target time for the fight, and then you can choose if you want to challenge them or not. Every 2 Colossi you defeat within the target time will give you a special item. Hard mode has its own version of time attack with different rewards, but you have to beat the game on hard mode first to unlock it. The final item you get for beating all the time attack challenges in hard mode is the Queen's Sword, which is a weapon from Eco that does so much damage it destroys the Colossi sigils in a single hit. Alright, so that's all the modes covered. Time to get into the real meat and potatoes of this video. The story is simple. Kinda. You see, we're this young man who wants to bring a dead girl named Mono back to life, and some being in the ancient lands named Dorman supposedly has the ability to do it. So we stole an ancient sword, got on our horse, and rode out to these lands and this giant temple called the Shrine of Worship, and we used the sword to awaken Dorman. This cutscene goes on for a while, and to be fair, this is the most exposition you're gonna get until the very end of the game, which I don't mind at all, but for the sake of pacing this video, I'm just gonna summarize it. Dorman tells us that what we are asking is kind of impossible, but since we have the ancient sword, it might be doable, but to do that we have to destroy the 16 giant idols in the room. Problem is, they can't be destroyed by any mortal weapon. So how do we do this? Well, there are 16 colossi that are the physical incarnations of those idols. If we kill them with the sword, the idols will shatter. Why does Dorman want us to do that? Good question. Wonder, he doesn't bother asking that, because all he cares about is saving Mono. She was sacrificed because of some sort of cursed fate. The game never explicitly states what her cursed fate was or is, but depending on how you want to interpret what happens at the end of the game may tell you what her fate is. But we'll get to that when we get to the ending of the game. Dorman does warn us that the price you may pay for doing this is heavy indeed. Wander just looks at Dorman and essentially says it is what it is. He's just like me for real. You may notice I am not giving you any details on anything. That's because the game doesn't. I know that sounds like a complaint, but it isn't. The game is vague kind of in the way the Souls games are, except I think Shadow of the Colossus is more vague due to there not being item descriptions for you to read or NPCs to interact with to flesh out the world. This works because the entire game has this foreboding air about it. The ancient lands feel empty and isolated outside of some random small animals. There's nothing else here but us, our horse, and the 16 Colossi we gotta slay. And the emptiness of it, and all the ruins that we'll see, kinda makes you feel like you're in a place you're not supposed to be. As we come to find out at the end of the game, yeah, we probably aren't supposed to be here right now. But the vagueness of it just gives it a sense of mystery, and has led to people trying to make sense of everything in the game and coming up with their own theories as to what's going on. Right now, the only things we know for certain from this cutscene is that Wander wants to revive Mono. She was sacrificed because of some sort of cursed fate. Wander's here because he learned of the legends that a being named Dorman that lives here can bring the dead back to life. But Dorman will only do it if we destroy the 16 idols by killing the 16 Colossi. We don't know why Dorman wants us to do this. We don't even know what Dorman is. And we don't even know what Wander's relationship to Mono is. Some of the promotional material and info on the cover art of the game mentions the word love, but there's different kinds of love though. They don't specify which one. I think it's implied that it's romantic, but it's never outright stated, at least not in the game. So you're free to interpret that however you want. Anyway, Dorman tells us what we can do to find each Colossus, which I've already said you use the sword to do that. But the structure of the game is basically a boss rush, but you have to go and find each one of them. You find a Colossus, you kill it, and then you get returned to the central hub, which is the shrine, and then you repeat the process until you've killed all 16 of them. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm gonna be putting each Colossus on a tier list, factoring in the design, the music, and a look at the arena, and the difficulty. When it comes to difficulty, the higher the score doesn't mean that the boss is more difficult. It just means that their difficulty fits where they are in the game and seems fair. If a boss has a difficulty of 1, it just means the difficulty is bad. Either it's too easy or too difficult for where it is in the game. I'll put the score ranges for each tier on screen. I'll be rating them in order. Once we finish with all the Colossi, I'll talk about the story and the ending. Let's start with number 1. Oh, and as a disclaimer, the names I give these Colossi are fan names that have been widely adopted. They actually originated from a hoax, but the names seem to have stuck, so I may use them, and the number interchangeably. They don't actually have names unless you want to count their development names, which are things like Minotaur A, Minotaur B, Minotaur C, Knight, Poseidon, etc. So let's get into it. Valus. The route to get to him is pretty basic. It's not far from the shrine. You gotta climb up a cliff, and when you reach the top, Valus makes his grand entrance. First impressions are everything. And Valus, yeah, he's not doing a bad job. What I love, and this is different from every other Colossi in the game, is that the music doesn't kick in until he becomes aware of you. You just get the ASMR of this thing stomping around, just letting you digest that yes, when the game referred to it as a Colossus, they weren't fucking around. And it's your job to kill it. It sort of reminds me of the T-Rex reveal in Jurassic Park, how you just hear its booming footsteps at first, and the characters slowly realizing that, yes, this is the part of the movie where you are in danger. The Colossus also doesn't immediately notice you unless you do something like whistle or shoot your bow at it. He won't see you for a while, until he turns around. This gives you ample time to size up your opponent.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, I'll see myself out after that one. But the minute he notices you, the music kicks in. The song that plays here is called Grotesque Figures, and I like how threatening it is. My only criticism is that I wish it played more than twice in the entire game. thing you'll notice is that each Colossi has multiple themes associated with it. It's usually 2, but some of them have 3, and in some cases they just have 1. But usually the theme will switch once you figured out a solution or have actually gotten on the Colossus, but sometimes it'll switch back if you fall off or otherwise have to repeat the process. The second theme during this fight, the open way, it's just epic as hell, man. Really makes you feel like you're about to win a fight that on paper you're not supposed to win. I'm not going to highlight every song in the game. Go look, or better yet, go buy the soundtrack yourselves. As I said earlier, you won't regret it. In terms of difficulty, the first Colossus is very easy. Which, I mean, he's the first boss of the game, he's supposed to be easy. You're still learning the game here. He has 2 methods of attacking you, a stomp and trying to flatten you with that giant mace of his. Yes, he can hit you with it, but you have to be a certain distance away from him before he'll use it. So you should try to avoid being at a medium range. If you stay at that range for too long, he will likely hit you. The attack, to be fair, is telegraphed hard as long as you're looking at it. So as long as you keep him in your sights, chances are you can avoid it. Also, when they're about to attack you, usually their eyes will turn orange. They also turn orange if you attack them, but usually only for a few seconds. And if you take too long to figure out what to do, Dorman will give you a hint. The hint is that you can use the sword to reveal its weak points. The main one is on its head, but the one that's more important right now is the one on the back of the leg. It's pretty straightforward. You just run up and grab his leg and then stab him in it until he keels over. While he's reeling from that, you can then climb up his body and eventually get to his head. Like all the Colossi, they will try to shake you off, so whenever you go to stab them, make sure you have enough stamina to hold out for a little bit. But once you stab him in the head enough times, he goes down. Yeah, that music doesn't really sound triumphant, does it? Doesn't really sound like victory music. Feels like something you'd hear in a movie when a character does a heroic sacrifice or has some kind of tragic death. Like, you could probably throw this over Boromir dying in Lord of the Rings and it would fit. But it feels out of place, and that was my initial reaction when I played the demo. Me and my dad both thought this music sounded strange. We were even more confused by the shadowy tentacles that erupted out of the body. What's that about? Don't worry about it. Congratulations, you just killed your first Colossus. Only 15 more to go. But Valis, in my opinion, he's a strong A tier with a score of 32 out of 40 points. The only thing that he lost points from me on is just that his arena isn't visually interesting. There are some temple ruins in it, but odds are you're not going to be anywhere near them. And since you don't need to interact with them during the fight, it's not a huge focus. Design-wise, the first Colossus looks great. There's a reason why he's featured a lot in the marketing, and it's just a simple, striking design. So as far as first impressions go, he does a good job. And difficulty, I mean, like I said, he's the first boss of the game, he's supposed to be easy. Doesn't really seem fair to dock him points for that. On to number 2. This is the beach episode, sorta. The arena is set near a seaside cave and it's not far from the shrine. We gotta cross a giant land bridge and then ride down a slope to the beach and ride to the cave in the distance. It's a pretty neat arena, and I do like how we have the pillars from the Great Bridge here too. Like number 1, this Colossus has quite the entrance, although this one's a little more panic-inducing. Yeah, he comes in like a bulldozer. We do have aggro here for this fight, but she isn't needed for it. We will be needing her for later fights though. But this is Quadratus, and being a quadruped, the only way he can attack you is to rear up on his hind legs and try to stomp you. It decides to try and intimidate the hell out of you first by getting low like it's trying to look you in the eye, before it decides to rear up and stomp on you. The solution here is not as straightforward as number 1's. But chances are, you'll probably have figured it out after it tries to stomp on you because you'll notice the underside of its hooves are glowing. And a general rule in video games is, if it's glowing, shoot it, or it means it's a weak point of some kind. There's actually 2 ways you can exploit that. One way is to wait for him to try and stomp on you, then shoot him in the foot so it feels like he stepped on a Lego. The other way, which is a little bit harder, and I don't think this was the intended way for you to do this, you can wait for it to take a step and then try to get an arrow lodged in there while it's walking. Either way, number 2 will fall over and you can climb up the fur on its leg. He has 2 weak points, one on his tailbone and one on his head. To get to the weak point, you gotta climb across his exposed spine and ribs, which is a pretty cool visual. In terms of attacks, I'd say he's easier to deal with than number 1. Since he doesn't have anything that has any real reach to it. The only other thing he can do to you is damage from falling off, or if you're unlucky and he somehow is able to step on you while he's walking normally. Because the stomp move is telegraphed well, there's no way you're not going to see it coming unless you really aren't paying attention. However, the solution to getting on his back is a little harder to figure out if you don't notice the glowing feet before it tries to step on you. Also, he does have 2 major weak points instead of 1, so it'll take you a little longer to deal with them. Design-wise, he's cool, and I think the devs knew it because he's in a lot of the promotional art. And for some reason, even his beta design is used a lot on stuff. Even the cover art on the game has it on the back. It's weird. Even though I will say his beta design looks creepy as shit. The arena does give it some points, so there's that, but unfortunately, it does not give him enough points to make it out of B tier. Getting to number 3 is more difficult than the others. You have to go a bit further away from the shrine and you gotta navigate through a narrow ravine. And while you're there, you won't be able to use the sword to check the direction so you can get turned around. And I'm definitely not saying that from experience. But once you find the right way to go, you come to a shadowy lake with a giant platform jutting out of the center with a stone path leading up. Again, because of the shadows, you won't be able to use the sword to figure out where to go, but I think it's pretty obvious where you're supposed to go now. Aggro cannot swim, so we're leaving her here. Once you get to the top, it's time to wake up number 3, or as the fans have called him, Gaius. There he is, there's the GOAT. A lot of people consider number 3 to be the first real fight of the game because he's definitely a step up in terms of difficulty. The first time I played this, it took me a while to figure out what the hell you were supposed to do. I'll circle back to that, because I really want to talk about his design. He looks so cool and menacing at the right angle that he was used in marketing a lot too. And I remember back in 2005 when the game hadn't dropped yet, Gaius showed up on a lot of posters in local game stores and in gaming magazines. I was surprised when I found out that he was only the 3rd boss in the game, because I thought he was the last one or close to it. And that's mostly because all the images I saw made him look like he was the tallest one in the game. But how was the fight? It can be a little bit frustrating. He has insane reach with that sword of his, and he will bonk the shit out of you with it. Yeah, this actually has become a meme template where people put text over Wander and then text over Gaius right as he bonks the player. Hell, you know what? I'll do it myself. Unintended comedy of that aside, you may notice when he slams the sword into the ground, it gets stuck there and it's at an angle that you can run up. As a kid, I figured out that you were supposed to run up the sword, but there's a problem with that. Number 3 has a bunch of armor on his arm that blocks you from climbing up there. There is a way around it that's unintended, and it involves exploiting the game's physics to have guys launch you into the air when he yoinks the sword out of the ground, and you can use that to catapult yourself past the armor. And I didn't know you could do that as a kid, and I was stuck here for a while trying to figure out what to do. Dorman does give you a hint that the armor looks brittle, but all that tells you is that it can be broken, but it doesn't tell you how. You gotta figure that out. Before I tell you the solution, I should go over this thing's other 2 attacks, because he can do more than just bonk you. If you're close enough, he can either go for a stomp or you can do a downward stab with the sword. I doubt you'll get hit by any of this. You're more likely to get hit by that big swing he does, which is harder to dodge than the other attacks we've dealt with so far, especially if you're an alumni of the Prometheus school of running away from things. But even running to the side sometimes won't be enough, because he can track you. But how are you supposed to break the armor? Well, there's a giant platform in the arena. Now you may have figured out what to do. You have to bait him into doing that big downward slam attack and get him to strike the platform. If you do this, you'll break the armor. But remember when I said this fight is a little frustrating? This is why. Getting Gaius to cooperate and hit the platform is way more annoying than it has any right to be, because a lot of times he'll just decide not to do it, and he might instead try to stomp the platform, which does trigger a unique animation where he slides across it, and there's some impact effects, which is another hint as to what you need to do here. But after you break the armor, you need to bait him to do it again, but this time on the soil. And now you can run up the sword and climb up on his arm. He does have 2 weak points to destroy, one on his head and one on his stomach. Yeah, we gotta give him a stomach ache. He will shake around a lot when you're on his head, so you may need to back off to his shoulders or his broken armor to recover your stamina. His death scene is a little unique because the music doesn't kick in right away. Yeah, he's definitely one of the best fights in the game as far as I'm concerned, and he stands out amongst the rest of Colossi that come before and after him. And his arena is just awesome. And difficulty-wise, he's definitely a step up from the previous 2. And you can feel the kid gloves are coming off a bit, but not in an ultra frustrating way. Although trying to get him to do what you need to in order to get the armor broken can be a little annoying, but not enough for me to dock points. Unfortunately though, I can't put him in S tier, but he is a very high A tier. Like, he's almost there. Literally just 1 point away. But let's see how number 4 fares. The path to number 4 is surprisingly straightforward. You just gotta go through a ravine and you'll enter this giant green area. Pretty beautiful. There's one thing that Dorman says when describing this boss that feels weird though. It mentions that this thing lies in a land with guiding graves, but there's nothing here that looks like a grave. Unless you count the ruins and the underground tunnels, but I don't know, they didn't read to me like a grave. Maybe it's a holdover from an earlier version of the game or something, I don't know. Anyway, number 4, or Phaedra, is hiding in the back. Phaedra's weird. He looks like an emaciated nightmare horse. He's also frustrating as hell, and the solution to this fight is not conveyed very well. Aggro is with us, but again, she's not required to defeat this thing. It just makes part of it faster. You may think the beads dangling off the head is a key to climbing up the creature's body. You're technically correct. There is a way to use them to get on the Colossus, but that's not the intended way to do this. No, see, what you're supposed to do is lower this thing to one of the entrances to the ruins, then climb inside, run through the tunnels, and then come out on the other side, hide behind a wall, and wait for the Colossus to lower itself to look for you, then run up and grab the tailbone and use that to get on his back. Sounds kind of easy, right? Problem is, number 4 doesn't cooperate very well, and I don't know how you were supposed to figure that out. I'm pretty sure this is when I had to break out the guidebook, because sometimes this nightmare horse will attack the entrance you just ran down, other times he might just get bored and fuck off somewhere else. There is a way to make sure he does what you want. You have to annoy the hell out of him by hitting him with arrows. Doing this will cause him to charge and change his entire walking style, and he'll just start angrily stomping towards you at a faster speed than before. That seems to get his AI to cooperate. But once you get on his back, it's pretty easy. He only has a minor weak point on his neck that you need to stab to, I guess, pinch a nerve and make him lower his head, so you can then get to the main weak point. While I really do like this arena, I find this fight a tad annoying, especially before I learned the arrow trick. It's frustrating and, in my opinion, not in a good way. So he definitely lost some points for that, and he ended up with a score of 23 out of 40, which puts him in C tier. Yeah, he's our first C tier. Hopefully number 5 can do better. Getting to number 5 isn't hard, but man, this arena is moody as hell with all the fog and the flooded structure, whatever this place was. I always thought it was some kind of sunken city. It feels very mysterious either way. You climb up the ruins to a platform where you can get a good view of the lake, and, well, yeah, it's burb time. Won't lie. As a kid, this thing scared the shit out of me by doing absolutely nothing. Seriously, it will just sit there and watch you menacingly. And that unsettled me for some reason. I kept thinking it was gonna attack me at some point. But the only thing it'll do is rotate on its perch to constantly face you. It will not attack you unless you shoot it with the bow. It does have 2 attacks, one of which you will probably never see unless you piss it off in the wrong place. If you shoot it and you're standing in a place where it can't dive bomb you, what it'll do instead is fly up to you and then create a powerful gust of wind to knock you back by using its wings. This was a holdover from a previous plan on how to defeat it. Back then, it would stay on a platform and flap its wings to knock you away. You had to dive underwater to dodge it, and swim around a bunch of pillars that were around the one that it's sitting on to get to the tail. Yeah, that's why its tail is so ridiculously long. But the main attack it has is important because you need to get it to do it, because that's how you get on its body. What you need to do is you need to stand on the 3 platforms out in the water, stand in the middle one, shoot it with the bow, and then when it dives down, you jump and grab onto the fur on its shoulder, and it carries you high into the air. And now my favorite piece of music in the game starts. Chef's kiss, goated soundtrack, 11 out of 10. If I was rating this fight purely on the spectacle of it, it's a 10. Between the music and the set piece of being carried high into the air while riding on this thing back while you hold on for dear life, it's easy to see why number 5 is popular in the community. It has 3 weak points, one at the end of the very long tail, and a weak point at the end of each wing. When you stab the wing though, the Colossus will do a barrel roll, and oh boy, you better have a decent amount of stamina because you're going to be hanging on for a while, even after he flips over. Don't worry, if you fall off, you'll land in the water and you won't die. You won't take any damage from it. Number 5 will fly around the arena, watching you as he does. And I hate when this happens because I remember a bug where I somehow aggroed him while falling off and his eyes turned orange, and as I swam to one of the platforms, he just came out of nowhere off screen and ran me. Yeah, that left me a little shook, I'm not gonna lie. The only issue I have with this fight is sometimes the game will just decide, oh, you weren't holding on to his wing hard enough. When he does a barrel roll, you'll just fall off, despite you holding the button to keep your grip and your stamina meter not being on empty. And I know what you're thinking, it's not an emulator glitch, because I remember this happening on native hardware too. I tested it. For some reason, it just happens sometimes. I don't get it. That weird issue aside, this fight is fun and he earns a respectable score of 33 out of 40, landing him in A tier. The only thing that he loses points for, in my opinion, is the difficulty figuring out what you need to do. Is pretty straightforward, especially when you compare to number 4. And while he has 2 attacks, the second one you're not likely to see any other one is intended to solve the puzzle, but if you miss, it's not that punishing, and falling off doesn't cost you any health since it's water. But I have a feeling that if there wasn't water there when you fell, it would lead to frustration. But overall, he's cool. One thing you may have noticed is he's not aggressive unless you attack him, and even after his initial attack, he'll leave you alone and just until you attack again. The music that plays when you defeat the Colossi does make a lot more sense here because you're really just killing a creature that was just chilling out minding its business. Alright, on to number 6. Barba. Oh man, Barba. So first we have to take a trek through the forest and then ride across an open desert area until we see a temple carved into the side of a rock wall. We gotta leave the horse behind and venture inside, and we see that the bottom of the temple is gigantic. Once we climb down to the bottom, the Colossus is revealed in a, let's just say, pretty memorable way. Yeah, Barba's entrance is pretty cool, and it immediately gets your blood pumping just due to how close he is to you. If you do not start moving the minute you get control over Wander, I hope you like being stomped on or crushed by one of his fists, because that's gonna happen. This first part of the fight is a chase. Barba is unique in the fact that he will relentlessly pursue you. So what you have to do is you have to climb these walls which slow you down, and if you aren't moving fast enough, he might catch up to you and do some damage. The walls don't stop him, by the way. He'll just walk right through them like they're nothing. So you gotta run to the end of the room and hide behind the temple pillars. Eventually he'll get frustrated and then lower his head to try and see where you are. What you gotta do then is just climb on the beard, but if you take too long, he'll hit the side of the temple and that'll cause you to take some damage. The strategy for defeating him is pretty simple, and I do like how aggressive he is. However, there's just one problem with this Colossus. His design. He's too similar to number 1. To the point where the dev name for him is Minotaur B. I wish he didn't look so much like the first Colossus. If he had a completely different design, I think I'd like him more. He was actually going to be even more similar to number 1 because at one point he had a sword, and in one of the early demo builds of the game you can see it. While the fight isn't hard, it is pretty unique, with it being a chase and all. But the design of the Colossus itself does bring it down in my opinion. In fact, while I'm on the subject of them being similar, there's evidence to suggest that at one point, you were supposed to use this same strategy on the first Colossus, as earlier versions of him show the temple in the background being more put together. The only thing that's stopping me from honestly giving him a 1 in design category is because of how the fight itself is designed. Because of that, he earns the lowest score so far of 22 out of 40, which puts him in C tier. Let's see if number 7 will fare any better. Thalassophobia is the persistent and intense fear of deep bodies of water, such as the ocean, seas, or lakes. Though related, thalassophobia should not be confused with aquaphobia, which is classified as the fear of water itself. Thalassophobia can include fears of being in deep bodies of water, the vastness of the sea waves, aquatic animals, and great distance from land. Why am I explaining that? It's because of this motherfucker right here. Yeah, that triggers a fear of being in a vast body of water because the idea of something that large lurking beneath you is creepy as shit to me. It also doesn't help that when you're underwater or the camera dips under the water, sound is muted a bit. But the way you have to defeat number 7 is also making the thalassophobia thing worse because you have to swim in front of his head to get his attention. Then you have to watch this big ass electric eel looking thing swim up to you like it's about to eat you, only for it to dive down its giant electrified spikes to breach the surface, and if you're anywhere near them, you will be shocked. What you have to do is then swim back to catch his tail as it breaches the surface. Once you see how it attacks you, you'll figure out what you need to do pretty quickly. Once you grab the tail, he'll start to surface. Now what you gotta do is run across his body when it's above water and hang on when it submerges again. You have to pay attention to the spikes. If you're near the orange colored fur when it submerges and the spike is still active, you will die very quickly. The good news is you can disable spikes by stabbing the marker at the base of them, so you gotta pick your movements carefully and time things properly. Don't take too long though, because eventually number 7 will realize that you can't hold your breath underwater, so eventually he'll just stay submerged and you'll just have to let go. The good news is you can't drown this game, you'll just be forced to the surface and unable to do anything else. The last spike is the hardest to get to because your window to run up and stab it is really short. Once you destroy it, you'll be able to attack his main weak point, the head. It will constantly dunk its head in and out of the water, giving you a split second to stab it before it decides to submerge again. Overall, it's a solid fight. Easily way more unique than number 6 at least. Well, he's not the only serpentine Colossus in the game. He's the only one that lives in water, and he feels different enough from the other two that he doesn't lose any points in the design department. He's also pretty lethal if you aren't paying attention and you find yourself in range of those spikes. Although you can't take away his options of attacking you, which is nice. He earns a lot of points for the arena too, so he gets a score of 30 out of 40, which puts him in B tier. Let's see what number 8 is offering. Number 8 has an interesting arena that, for the longest time I thought it was some kind of Colosseum or something, but I've seen other people draw similarities to old medieval wells, so now I lean towards that it's just a well that's gone dry. The path to it is interesting, and the sight of a temple sitting out in the center of a body of water, it is pretty striking. Number 8, or Kuromori as fans have dubbed him, he ain't exactly colossal when you compare him to the others we fought up until this point. But if you think this is going to be a cakewalk, oh boy, you got another thing coming. What is interesting about this Colossus is he doesn't know you're there initially. You have to provoke him. And you better be prepared once you do because, yeah, he does that. I remember dropping the controller when I saw him scaling the wall and his head peering into the window I had just shot him from. For some reason, it didn't register in my brain that he was some sort of murder gecko. And that face, it's something out of a nightmare, especially when his eyes are orange. That blast he fires, it might not seem deadly at first, but if you linger in that cloud for more than a second, you will regret it. Yeah, you better stay moving because he will chase after you. Good news is, unless he can see you, he'll just attack the last spot he saw you at or the last spot you attacked him from. So you can use that to reposition and get a better shot. The strat is to shoot 2 of his legs to get him to fall off the wall and land on his back, which exposes his weak points. The higher up he is before you knock him off, the longer he stays down. Alternatively, assuming you have a shot, you can shoot him in the stomach with arrows to knock him off the wall. You'll likely only have time to destroy one sigil before he rolls over, and you'll want to steer clear and run away before he does that because you can take damage from it. He can also whip you with his tail if you try to stay on the ground with him. So yeah, you gotta repeat the process to destroy the second sigil. Despite being on the small side, he's surprisingly deadly. Underestimate him at your own peril. Between his unique design and the spectacle of him climbing up the wall after you, the poison gas attacks, and the design of the arena, yeah, number 8 is punching way above his weight class here, and he is our first S tier, coming in with a score of 36 out of 40. I guess even the smaller Colossi can be impressive in their own way. On to number 9. Before we look at number 9, I gotta bring up the story again because we actually get a cutscene here that's relevant. You'll likely notice that with each Colossi we kill, another shadowy figure appears standing over Wander. What you may not have noticed is Wander's appearance is changing. His clothes are becoming damaged and filthy, which is just a great detail. But that's not all. On top of Wander developing cuts on his knees and other parts of his body, his hair is changing colors too. It's getting darker. If he's aware of it, he doesn't show it. I'm sure it's nothing, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. But on to number 9, the Nightmare Turtle. He lives in an area called the Badlands, and it's living up to its name because it's a barren area that's engulfed in a dark haze that makes everything feel ominous. And that's fitting because you better lock the fuck in because this turtle is likely to kick your ass. You may be thinking, it's a turtle, how deadly can it be? He has chin bolts.
Huh?
Did I stutter?
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Yeah, he's way more deadly than you would think. If you decide to venture into his cave, he'll slam his shell against the roof and make it rain boulders. Once he's outside, he'll rear up to stomp you if you get too close. That's preferable to death by chin bolts, that's a sentence. What you need to do is you need to use the horse for this fight because you ain't dodging them reliably on foot. You also need to get the murder tortoise out of his cave if you want to defeat it. The way you beat it, I ain't gonna lie, it's a bit annoying because you have to lure him over one of the many geysers in the area. However, he sometimes won't follow you, and he'll just sit there spamming his chin lasers, which is rather annoying because you need him to be standing over the geyser. Once you do this, the geyser will have enough force to almost knock him off the ground, but you're gonna need to help it out in order to knock him over. You gotta target the glowing zones on his feet. Once you shoot them, he goes crashing, and you gotta be quick about this because the geysers don't stay up forever, and they will shut off for a little bit. But once you shot both legs, you can feel some catharsis as you watch this bitch topple over in spectacular fashion. Now you can run and climb up on his belly and onto his shell before he flips back over. If you do that without falling off, you can run up his back and attack the only weak point, which is his head. Oh man, I ain't gonna lie, number 9 is a pain. Even though I find getting him over the geyser and dealing with his long range attack annoying as hell, he's still not that bad of a fight. It is fun watching him flip over and his design is unique. And since we are past the halfway point, the jump in difficulty is a bit more justified than if you were thrown in earlier in the game. He gets a 30 out of 40, and that lands him in B tier. On to number 10. I got a question for you all. Have you ever wanted to be chased by Shah Halud from Dune? Well, this is the closest you'll probably get because number 10 is Dirge, a giant pissed off sandworm. Only other game I can think of that has a giant worm battle where it's chasing you like this is maybe the giant ice worm in Lost Planet. Man, that scared the fuck out of me when I was playing that game for the first time. Actually, you know what? Now that I remember, the second one also has a giant worm. That one you're on a train and you're like riding next to it, if I remember. But the arena for this thing clues you in on what you're about to fight. It's a giant cave filled with sand. 10, I think, takes the cake for the most aggressive Colossi in the game, because it's almost always chasing you down, and you cannot outrun it without aggro's help. If I could describe this fight in one phrase, it would be panic-inducing. And if you're wondering why, may I present Exhibit A. The unique piece of music that plays during this fight also adds to the panic. If I was allowed another phrase, it would be nightmare fuel, because look at them eyes. They look ready to steal your soul, man. They look like they're breaking the fourth wall. If that ain't scary enough for you, if you take too long to do what you need to do, this'll happen. Yeah, he tries to eat you. Good news is, it's not an insta-kill, but he hits like a truck. But what you need to do is have aggro run like hell while it's chasing you, wait for it to show its eyes, then spin around the horse with your bow drawn and shoot it in one of the eyes. When you do this, the beast will spin out of control and plunge its head into the sand, as it shakes in pain like me when I'm chopping onions in the kitchen. It has 2 markers on its back, and you won't be able to get both of them in one go, unless you have some bonus items to up your damage, or if you're playing on New Game Plus. Eventually, it'll recover and it'll go back into the sand and it'll move away from you for a little bit, but eventually it'll come back, or you can ride near it to get it to chase you again and repeat the process. Unlike the other Colossi, this one seems to be hunting you, as it's clear it's trying to eat you. Its eyes are always orange and it will chase you non-stop. Definitely a memorable boss fight, that's for sure. It did take me a minute to figure out where to put him on the list, but after thinking about it, I think he also deserves the S tier, and you know what? I'm gonna put him a point higher than number 8. So yeah, with a score of 36 out of 40, number 10 makes it to the S tier. Damn, 2 S ranks and not that far removed from each other. Looks like the game is hitting its stride, and with only 6 Colossi left, I wonder how it's gonna look from here. Okay, the path to number 11 is pretty interesting since you have to ride towards the entrance to the Ancient Lands, and you'll notice a weird landmark that then indicates that there's a giant hole in the ground with a path leading downward and some ruins on the other end to get into. Once you venture up there and make it across the gap, you'll find your target, or more correctly, it finds you. Okay, number 11, he's another small Colossus, and he might be one of the deadliest in the game for one very annoying reason. If he hits you, he can stun lock you and keep hitting you over and over again. Get up, I dare you. Get up, I dare you, pussy.
Where the fuck you think you going?
Yeah, when you get hit in this game, Wander doesn't backflip and slide across the arena like it's Devil May Cry or something. Nah, he stays down for a while. You can wiggle the analog stick or mash buttons to make him get up faster, but just know that you're gonna have less than a second before this freight train comes crashing into you again. I suggest you try to roll towards one of the gaps near the braziers in the room, because he can't headbutt you from there. If you do make it in there, you're not completely safe because it can try to reach in with its claws to drag you out of the hole, and if you're too close to the entrance, it will be able to do it. What you have to do here is kind of weird. It took me a while to figure it out. See, if you climb up on top of the brazier, number 11 will ram it to try and knock you off, and when he does this, it causes a plank of wood to fall out. What you need to do is wait for number 11 to hit it again, and while it's recovering from that, you need to jump down and grab the plank and then run like hell back to safety before it recovers. The problem is, unless you've been shooting and collecting the fruit from off the fruit trees, or hunting the lizards that give you stamina upgrades, you will not know that you can pick up objects. The game never tells you this. I got stuck here when I first played this game because I couldn't figure out what button to use to grab the stick, and it took me a few attempts to figure it out. Once you have the plank, you press circle to light it, and then you can jump down and use that to scare the Colossus away. Yet despite him being made of stone, he's afraid of fire. It will cower away from you, but don't get too close because it can scratch you and knock you away.
Hey, bro, chill. Chill, take it easy, bro. Chill. It was just a prank, bro. Chill. Quit playing, bro. Quit playing.
What you have to do is get it to back out of the ruins and fall off the cliff. You have approximately 40 seconds before the torch goes out, and once it goes out, the Colossus will attack you immediately. So you may want to hurry up. Once you get him outside, this happens. Now you can hit its weak spot on its back. The Colossus will lie there for a little bit so you can jump down and land on its back. Don't miss because it'll wake up immediately when you're near it, and getting on its back after it wakes up is risky as hell. Once you're on its back, it will run back to the ruins, stopping to shake constantly. Eventually it'll jump back to the main arena and you can get back to the braziers to hide and recover stamina, and bait it into hitting the brazier again to stun itself. This fight is definitely a challenge, that's for sure. It's also unique compared to the others we face, and even the other smaller Colossus number 8 feels completely different from this thing. However, the arena's just okay, so I'm just gonna give it a B, a score of 27 out of 40. Alright, what's next? The path to this one is very scenic, and includes taking a brief trip through a forest and then up a rocky path to face a giant waterfall. We have to clear the waterfall and then swim around the giant gate behind it to a large watery area. Number 12 certainly takes the cake for the weirdest Colossus in the game. I have no idea what to make of its design. It sort of stands like a gorilla, but it has no eyes, just these tusk looking things that stick out of the sides of its head. And if that wasn't weird enough, it has teeth sticking out of the top of its head. The tusks glow and change colors like eyes, so I guess it has some way of sensing you. And it doesn't swim either, it's so tall it just walks on the lake floor. According to the wiki and the excerpt from the art book, it was originally supposed to have eyes. I don't know what the hell to make of this thing. Its only method of attack is firing bolts of electricity from those horns. You can avoid them by hiding behind the pillars and objects in the environment. What you gotta do is swim around to its back and then grab the moss to reach its head. Seems pretty easy, right? Well, the weak point isn't there. Remember those teeth I mentioned? Yeah, if you strike those, you can make the Colossus move in that direction. Yeah, this is pretty weird. Hitting the front teeth makes it stumble forward, and attacking the sides gets it to turn. Once you figured that out, You can probably guess what you need to do from there. You need to lure it to one of the platforms that has an upper level. Then you jump off and be ready to hide because this thing will attack you immediately. Eventually, it'll decide to rear up and put its front feet on the platform. When it does this, it actually exposes its only weak point, a patch of fur in its open ribcage. Yeah, his ribcage is open for some reason. You don't have a lot of time to get that many stabs in, as it will pull itself back into the water. But if you do enough damage to it, it'll get angry and destroy the platform you were just on, so you can't use it anymore. You gotta repeat the process until it's dead. This fight is weird. I give it points for its design because, yeah man, I don't know what the hell this thing is. In terms of difficulty for where it's placed in the game, I would say it's pretty easy as its attacks are telegraphed well, but figuring out what to do isn't that hard either. The arena is kinda neat, but it's just another area full of water, so I don't know if I can rate it that high. Unfortunately, number 12 earns 23 out of 40 points, which puts him in C tier. Let's see if number 13 fares any better. Whatever is happening to Wander, it is getting worse, as now his hair has turned completely black. My god, Dorman is making him emo! He's gonna act like Bully Maguire in Spider-Man 3 in a second. But for whatever reason, Wander doesn't address that at all. Would you think that would be something you would be a little worried about? But if that wasn't bad enough, it appears that some people are writing to our location. But we'll worry about that later. That's future us's problem. We have another Colossus to kill. The way he reaches one is simple, and man, is this area beautiful. I'm a sucker for deserts with harsh sunlight, and what can I say? Number 13 definitely leaves a very good impression. Yeah, that thing is massive. The strategy for defeating it, it's pretty neat and straightforward. You see those glowing sacks on his belly? You gotta deflate them with arrows. Doing this causes the Colossus to descend and those large wings in the front to dig into the sand. And those things have ridges on them that you can grab onto. So you have to chase it down and get beside it and then jump off the horse and grab onto the ridges before it recovers and flies back up. This can be a little tricky because your arrows aren't hit scan, meaning they actually have travel time, and you have to factor that in with the Colossus moving. On top of that, sometimes it can be hard getting into position on the horse so you can actually jump and grab the ridges. But once you got the hang of it, it's not that bad. The Colossus will rise to the air again and you have to jump onto its back and target each of the 3 markers. This Colossus, however, is smart. You see, each marker is beneath a flap on his back, and after you destroy a sigil or if you spend too much time on his back, he'll choose to close the flaps and then nosedive into the sand to get away from you. If you don't jump off in time, you'll take damage. You have to wait for it to surface again and then shoot the air sacs again and repeat the whole process. You'll notice I haven't mentioned something yet. Its attacks. That's because it doesn't have any. Yeah, you heard me, this boss has no way of damaging you, outside of you falling off or not jumping off in time when he dives into the sand. We are executing this giant, harmless, peaceful creature to bring a girl back from the dead. It also has the longest death scene in the game, and I don't know if that was intentional, but I really think they made this death scene longer to try and make you feel bad. I don't know if the devs ever intended for it to have an attack and they just scrapped it for whatever reason, or if this was a deliberate decision. Kind of showed that you might not be as noble as you think you are. Because up until this point, you may have thought that you were this noble, selfless hero trying to save this woman. But in a weird way, you're both selfish and selfless at the same time, depending on how you want to look at it. Because when you really think about it, the Colossi are just minding their business. They aren't harming anyone or threatening the world as a whole. It seems like this land is pretty contained. Hell, most of the Colossi are landlocked, so they can't really go anywhere. Just something to think about since we're getting close to the end of the game. So number 13, while I respect what I think the game is trying to tell you at this point, the lack of any attacks against the player nets us the lowest difficulty score of 1 out of 10. But the beauty of its design, the arena, and the music here does save it. As much as I like his design, I just can't justify putting him too high on this list. So he ends up getting a score of 26 out of 40, which puts him in the B tier. Again, visually, very impressive, and the fact that they got this running on a PS2 is nuts to me. But we gotta move on. We're in the final 3 now, so this better be getting good. Number 14. Okay, before I get into the bad, let me talk about the good first. I like the trek to this thing. We gotta go through the Badlands and beyond and find a cave that leads us to a flooded area and a giant forgotten city beyond. What happened to the people here and what purpose this city served is a mystery, but it isn't long before we find number 14. Okay, now I gotta get into the bad. Its design is basically a clone of number 11. While I do like its armor and I do think it does look pretty cool, it just feels too much like number 11. And that's a problem because that's a Colossus we're only 2 fights removed from. And this is one of the final 3. It does feel more dog-like than number 11 and it doesn't have the tusk. And like I said, I do like the armor across its body, but it's just too similar. Okay, to give him some credit, the strategy to beat it is different, because you have to run across the ruins and you have to bait this thing into striking the pillars to knock them over so you can then reach other pillars to make it around the city and back to a wall that you passed on the way in. Once you get to ram the final pillar, it shatters the wall and allows you to return to the entrance, but it also lets the Colossus through. And what you need to do at this point is run like hell and climb up the ledge and then walk over to the broken stone roof and bait the thing into ramming the pillar by annoying it with your bow. Once you do that, this happens. Does this feel familiar to anyone else? Even the music tracks for this fight are exactly the same as number 11's. If you can't tell, I ain't a fan of this fight. While it is a harder version of number 11, that's just not doing enough for me at this point. I don't know, maybe I'd be more forgiving if it was encountered earlier and wasn't in the top 3 and it wasn't so close to the other one that it feels very similar to. As it stands right now, dude is an easy C tier, coming in at the absolute bottom with a score of 21 out of 40. Get this off my screen, I'm done. Okay, I shouldn't be that mean to it. To be fair, it does have some redeeming qualities to it, and it does have some fun moments. But yeah, let's just move on. We got 2 more. Let's see where they fall. Unfortunately, and I'm just gonna spoil that right now, the disappointment I felt from number 14, it ain't going away with number 15. But let me talk about the good first. We're back at that desert near the entrance to the ancient lands, and in the distance is a giant ruined fortress of some kind. And this is a cool area and it feels very foreboding and even a bit solemn. Also, the boss's entrance is cool. Yeah, it's another Valis clone. And it's the penultimate boss. Okay, to be fair, he does have a unique track that fits the vibe of the arena. He does have one unique thing to him, but I gotta get to that in a second. We're gonna put that on the back burner. The strategy to beat him took me forever to figure out, because what you need to do is lure him to one of the walls where there's a lower ledge, but it's just out of reach. You have to get it to stomp on the tile on the floor, which raises it so you can jump up and grab the ledge. I figured that out by complete accident after running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Dorman's hint is not helpful. He just tells you to find its hidden vitals, which, to be fair, it does have some hidden ones, and we'll get to that in a minute. But by the time you should worry about that, you've likely solved the main puzzle. When I saw the platform raise when he stomped it, a light bulb went off. Once you're up on the elevated level though, you'll get stuck again until you notice something, or until I notice something, I should say. The Colossi will roll his shoulder, the one holding the giant stone sword. I decided to try shooting him to see what happens, and he took a swing at where I was hiding, and it caused some of the stones from above to fall, and I could use that to climb to reach the bridge above. From here, figuring out what to do is pretty easy. Just provoke him again and get him to hit the bridge, but stay towards the start of it, don't be in the center like an idiot. Once he shatters it, wait for him to pass over it and then jump. Once you destroy the sigil on his head, you'll notice he ain't dead yet. Yeah, now we can talk about his hidden vitals, as Dorman put it, because he's got one more sigil and it's hidden pretty well in a place you wouldn't expect it to be. It's in his hand, the one holding the sword. We gotta make him drop it. There's a minor sigil on the back of his arm. If you stab it, he'll drop the sword. You'll hear the opened way one last time in this part of the fight. What you gotta do is let go of him and then bait him into slamming his fist into the ground, and then grab the fur in his hand and stab him until he dies. He doesn't have the bright idea to just close his fist while you're in it. That would be kind of funny if he could actually do that, even though it would be annoying as shit. My major gripe with this fight is his appearance. He just feels way too similar to number 1 and number 6, and he's the semi-final boss. At least, to be fair, he is more spaced out than 11 and 14. I think the difficulty for where he is fair in the unique music track and the arena saves him from being in C tier, but not by much. So he's low B for me. Hopefully our final Colossus can turn around the slump we're in right now. So number 16 has the most unique path to reach him because he's the only Colossus that has an arena that you cannot get to before you're supposed to fight him. Because it's locked behind a gate, we have to reflect the light back into it, but the only way you can do that is if number 16 is your target, or if you hack the game. Once you get in, you ascend and you come to a bridge. If you try to jump the bridge and run across it on foot to the master structure beyond, it will collapse beneath you and you won't make it. You're not fast enough. You gotta use the horse. on, bro, not the horse. You can't do this to us, man. Our only companion is now gone, and the only thing we can do is watch him fall. Wander looks up knowing our final target is somewhere up there. Man has a one-track mind. As we climb, the winds kick in, the sky darkens. By the time we reach the top of the platform, the storm is in full swing. This is the one and only time the weather has changed since we got here, and an intense storm seems fitting for the final battle. Once we step out, we see the final Colossus. It's gigantic and looks quite human. It's also the tallest unless you count the length of the more serpentine colossi, like 10, 7, and 13. Its human-like appearance is pretty ironic considering we've been sacrificing our humanity killing the other 15 to get here. And there is obviously something very wrong with us. It also sounds the most human with its noises, and it reacts to pain like a person would. Speaking of neat details, the map quadrant it's on is F8. Or Fate, which when you realize this thing can see the pillars of light marking where each Colossus was killed, it's been slowly watching you kill off the other 15 while it can't do anything but stand there and watch. Almost like it's accepting its fate.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, I'll stop. I'm getting into pretentious video essayist territory with that one. But I wasn't kidding about him just standing there. He is completely stationary. His feet are fused to the platform so he can't chase after us. This should be an easy fight then, right? Right. Yeah, he can do that. And these bolts, according to the wiki, can home in on you. I haven't noticed that. Probably don't need to say it, but do not step out of cover because he will immediately blast you and send you flying. And he can loop you like this too if you don't make it to cover. I love the visuals here with the heavy storm, the dark clouds, the size of the Colossus, and the solemn music. Yeah, the music at first doesn't seem fitting for a final battle. If I played this out of context, you wouldn't even think this would be playing during a boss fight. You'd think it'd be playing during some kind of tragic emotional scene, like somebody's death or something. But I think the music is meant to reflect that we know we're doing something we probably shouldn't, but at this point, you've come too far to stop. You've sacrificed everything. Your humanity and your horse, and you're meant to wander. Was it all worth it? The music never changes either, even when you get close enough to start climbing on it. No, you don't get any of that bombastic, triumphant music that you usually get. It's just endless sadness here. It's like the game itself is telling you to stop. But obviously, we don't have a choice. We just have to keep going. What we have to do is run to the tunnels using the ruins as cover to avoid being hit. You have to do this 3 times, and on your 3rd run on the surface, that can get a little dicey. But once you reach the feet, you realize there is nothing that this Colossus can do to stop you at this point. Okay, that's technically not true, and I'm pretty sure this is a bug. But if you attack the bits of his body that are made of energy, somehow he can shoot you even through that stone skirt thing of his. Don't ask me how that works. But at this point, we have to climb up his body. It's pretty simple, but when you make it to the halfway point, that's where things get a bit interesting. You'll find a minor weak point on his lower back. Hitting this causes him to bend over and grab his lower back in pain. And yeah, I've been there before. Lower back pain sucks. But this gives us the opportunity to climb onto his hand. And there's something really strange about this Colossus. When he sees you on his hand, it almost looks like it's just curious about you. It does try to shake you off, but the best way I can describe it is it feels like it's looking at you like the way you would look at a weird bug that's crawling on your hand. You're just watching to see what it is. But you have to run up its arm and stab its bicep so it grabs its arm with its other arm. And again, a pretty human reaction to pain. This is where the climb gets harder because it's not clear what you need to do. You might figure out that you need to shoot its shoulder, but it doesn't keep its hand level long enough for you to do that. What you're meant to do is stab it in the hand so it holds it level, and then shoot the shoulder so it brings the hand to its shoulder so you can jump off and run up behind its neck, and then climb onto its head. Problem is, the game doesn't indicate that you should stab the hand. I'm trying to remember how I figured this out when I first played the game. I think I ended up stabbing it out of frustration because it kept falling off, and I just got annoyed and just decided to stab its hand to see what would happen. But once you figured that out and you're on the back of the neck, you've made it. He only has one major weak point and it's on his head. And he probably shakes the most out of any Colossus, and he even stops shaking for a split second only to start up again. So you may need to retreat to the base of his neck to get your stamina back. Eventually, number 16 goes down. Its death scene is really quick considering it's the final boss of the game. In terms of final bosses, it's kind of interesting how restrained it is. While it's large and imposing, the battle doesn't feel that intense, and it's not crazy difficult once you figure out that you need to approach it using the tunnels. And to be fair, according to the devs themselves, this wasn't supposed to be the final boss. It was originally a different boss of devs called Buddha. Even some of the concept art for its earlier design outright states this guy wasn't the last boss. He had a different head and no armor on his chest, and if you look at the art, you can see there's a chain around his foot to suggest he's anchored in place. So if this guy wasn't supposed to be the final boss, what was? Well, we'll get into that later. First, let me wrap up this section with how he stacks up to the other bosses. Well, he gets a 10 for design, a 10 for that arena, and also a 10 for music. Really, the only category he loses points in is difficulty. Because for the final boss, I wouldn't say he's that hard to deal with. The only part that's tough is figuring out what to do when you're on his other hand, and trying to get to the final tunnel opening without getting hit. Usually if you get caught, you'll just go flying back into the tunnel, and he won't be able to hit you again until you make another attempt. So it's not that bad. Despite the difficulty penalty, number 16 is our last S rank, and he also net himself a score of 36 out of 40, meaning he's tied with number 10. So yeah, this is our tier list, with our highest scoring Colossi being number 16, number 10, number 8, number 3, and number 5. Our lowest scores being, well, number 14, number 6, number 11, and number 4, with the others just kind of being in the middle. But enough about my totally objective rating system. Let's talk about that ending. So the guys we saw riding towards our location make it to the shrine before we do. The one leading them is a guy named Lord Iman. He is horrified to see that he's arrived too late, and the final idol has already shattered. We also finally get an answer as to how do we keep returning to the shrine after every Colossi we've killed. Yeah, those pillars of light we see in the sky, it seems we float into those and then we get returned to the shrine. That might explain the weird visual we see every time we kill a Colossus. When we return to the shrine, it's clear we're no longer human. I mean, if the horns and the discolored skin and the weird eyes weren't a dead giveaway. But as we teleport back, the sword goes flying and crashes into the ground. Iman says we stole the sword and performed a forbidden ritual to resurrect Dorman. He also claims we are possessed by the dead and that we are just being used. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means Dorman is like an amalgamation of dead people or something. Dorman's never really explained. Anyway, he orders his men to kill us and they stab us with a sword. Something hilarious happens that you might not have noticed, and I didn't notice it the first time playing this. The guy who stabs Wander, it looks like he stabbed himself. It's just a really funny animation mistake, or he was just tired of life. Also, notice how we bleed and die like the Colossi do? Anyway, that's not the end of the game though, because Dorman decides he wants to tag in. Dorman's design is really interesting. You can kind of see that he has elements of the Colossi we fought already. His feet are hooves like many of the Colossi, he has horns like some of them do, and he even has elements from the cut ones that we'll talk about later. What's really neat about this part is we take control of Dorman and attack Iman's men. It's kind of like we're now the final boss of the game, but sadly, you can't kill them no matter how much you hit them, which hitting them is much harder than you think it is because Dorman moves very slowly, and there's always a delay between his movements. It's an interesting role reversal with us being the giant this time, but it really doesn't last that long because Iman takes the ancient sword and tosses it into the pool of water at the bottom of the shrine, and this creates a giant vortex that begins pulling us in. Dorman's monstrous form gets stripped away, revealing a shadowy version of Wander still there. We have control over Wander, but there's not much you can do. You can spam jumps to try and resist a vortex, but if you get too far away, it just seems like the game is scripted to pull you back in no matter what you do. You can try grabbing the edges of the pool, but once once your stamina runs out, you'll be pulled in. Fitting that the death music for the Colossi plays here for us at the end, and it just loops until we get pulled in. Once it happens, everything in the pool vanishes. Okay, so this ending is pretty long, so I'm gonna give the abridged version. Iman's people flee across the bridge. It begins to crumble behind them, leaving no obvious way in or out of this place. Mono comes back to life, and that's not the only thing that's not dead. Yeah, the goated horse is still alive. The fact she survived that fall and walked all the way back here is nuts. After we get a montage showing the corpses of all the Colossi and a beautiful piece of music, I'd love to play it in full, but this video is going to be long as hell as it is, so I'm going to jump to what happens after you see the corpse of the last Colossus. Iman's people reach the end of the bridge, and he looks back and says that if you're somehow still alive, or if you could even survive in this place, then it might be possible for the player to atone for what they've done here. And then we find out that, yeah, we're not dead. At the bottom of the dried up pool, there is a human baby with red hair and horns, and you can actually make the baby do certain things by pressing certain buttons. But yeah, we've seen him have been reduced to a baby. Mono picks us up, and she and the horse end up venturing to a garden area that's higher up in the shrine, and there's a deer here, which is something we never saw before. The game ends there, and we see a bird flying out across the land, which sort of mirrors the opening movie that plays when you boot up the game. Overall, it's a really somber, bittersweet ending. Yes, we're alive in some shape or form. Yes, Mono is not dead anymore. The horse is okay, and there seems to be an implication that life can exist in this place now, so maybe the three characters stuck here can survive. We're also left with more questions than answers, and that's probably why so many people are obsessed with this game and uncovering every secret in it to try and figure out more of what's going on. Definitely not talking about myself sitting here making this ridiculously large video. And now we're going to talk about some of that and how I interpret some of the things in this game. Bear with me here. Okay, so there's been so many theories about what's happening in this game, and because of how little the game actually gives, and even the information that it does give, often introduces more questions, which is fine. Sometimes it's better not to overly explain things and leave some mystery for the audience. My point is that you could go down a rabbit hole looking at old videos, people trying to figure out what was going on for hours, and you probably wouldn't get bored. But I'm gonna limit myself to only looking at 2 questions that I have, and these are questions that have bugged me for years. Well, bugged me is probably not the best way to put it. More like, I'll just say lived rent-free in my head. That's probably better. The first one being, is Dorman evil? And this is a question that I don't even know where I stand on, because the obvious answer you would think would be yes, because I mean, look at him. He looks pretty demonic. I bet most people would probably shit their pants if they saw this thing staring at them. But that's kind of a simple answer, and some of the Colossi look kind of evil and scary, but when you really think about it, they're kind of just animals minding their business until you disturb them. Some of them are a little more aggressive than others. So I don't know if the answer is that simple, because we really don't know what Dorman intends to do after it's free. Obviously, it does trick Wander into freeing it and then possesses him. Yeah, that sounds pretty evil, doesn't it? But there's a few things that make me question that. For one, and this is about what it says when it takes over your body, pay attention to the wording. It says borrow, and it also calls you a warrior, which might not seem like a big deal, but it actually is, because look at how Wander swings that sword. Does that look like someone who knows how to use that? I think that's deliberate to tell you that Wander is not a warrior at all. And we do know that he stole this sword, supposedly from Iman, so it's safe to assume Wander is not accustomed to using that thing. If anything, to me, it seems like Wander might be more of a hunter since he seems proficient with that bow. So Dorman calling you a warrior seems like it's paying you a compliment, actually. Also, and this is the more important thing, the fact that it says borrowed. When you borrow something, the implication is that you intend to return it at some point. Now, there are some people who will use borrow as a code word for stealing something to kind of soften what they actually are going to do. Why would Dorman bother saying that he's borrowing it if he has no intention of giving it back? And nothing in the game indicates that Iman would just let Dorman go if he said, "Oh yeah, I'm just borrowing this body for like 10 minutes. It's not a big deal. You know, I'll give it back." You know, I don't think Iman would be like, "Oh, you're just borrowing it for 10 minutes? All right, cool. We'll see you later, man. All good." Like, they're not gonna do that. Like, I don't think Iman would humor that. So why would Dorman even bother hiding its intentions? There's no need to keep up the act. Another thing we had to talk about is Mono being alive. Did Dorman actually keep its end of the bargain? If so, why? Because if it was just going to keep possessing your body, then why bother fulfilling its end of the agreement? Now, there is a theory as to why this happened, and I don't think it's ever been disproven, but I don't think it's ever been confirmed by anyone either. Because if you notice and listen during the entire ending, the female voice that Dorman has in the beginning of the game, yeah, it's not there anymore. It still refers to itself as we, but the female voice is completely absent.
Ikuka order!
Dormi before Alula Ostu Hailwa Wuku Aikwa Ujus Yazu Tsudoko Was Nortekyo Utiura
I will you
Also, just as how after every Colossi death, another shadow appears around us, another dove appears around Mono. Some people draw comparisons to stuff like yin and yang and duality, since there seems to be a theme of light and dark. You use light to find the path to the Colossi. When they die, their bodies appear to be engulfed in shadow. Shadowy tendrils with glowing edges shoot out of them, and in fact you are brought back to the temple in a ray of light. The vortex that defeats us at the end of the game is also made of light and strips away the darkness from Wander. And when the idols and bridge shatter, they shatter in a flash of light. And Dorman also speaks to us seemingly through a giant beam of light that's shining from above, but it manifests as a shadow. So the theory is the female part of Dorman, which I guess you could interpret as like the light part of Dorman, I guess, was transferring to Mono the entire time while we were absorbing the shadow we have and we were returned to the shrine. So if you follow this theory, then Mono might not be Mono anymore. Some people take this a step further and say that because the game is a prequel to Ueda's previous game Ico, which does feature horned children, and that was viewed as a curse, and the antagonist in that game is a woman with mastery over darkness and shadows that appears to be very similar to the powers Dorman has, and she also deploys shadow people after you in that game. So some people have theorized that the queen from Ico is Mono, a Mono that possessed or corrupted by Dorman's power, as the queen is stated to be very old, and it seems like a long time has passed since Shadow of the Colossus. I don't think this is the case. Keep in mind, I have not played all of Ico, just a demo decades ago, so there might be more to the theory than I think. Do I think Mono is possessed by Dorman? No, but I can't say anyone who thinks so is 100% wrong either. The reason why I don't think that's the case is because if she's possessed, why does she appear completely human? While when Wander was fully possessed, you could tell. Also, why didn't she do anything during the fight to stop Iman then? Was the process just not complete? I think Dorman actually kept his end of the bargain here. But let's say that Dorman isn't evil for a second. then why are Iman's people so afraid of him? Why did they feel the need to split it into multiple pieces? If there's one thing humans tend to do is we tend to be afraid of things we don't understand. And Dorman is something I bet a lot of people would not understand at all. Not to mention Dorman's ability to revive the dead. In a lot of mythologies, bringing the dead back to life is typically seen as taboo and a perversion of the natural order of things, since everything lives and dies. It's possible whatever religion or ideology Iman follows, they view what Dorman is as sacrilege and unholy. Of course, the flip side to all of this is Dorman is actually evil or some sort of demon or false idol or something. I mean, his name is Nimrod spelled backwards, and the shrine kind of feels like it's trying to draw a parallel to the Tower of Babel, or Babel. I hear people use either pronunciation interchangeably. My guess is people of this land worship Dorman at this shrine, and then something catastrophic happened. I don't know, maybe it was just Iman's people showed up and saw what Dorman could do, and felt it was evil, and was just like, we're not gonna allow that to happen anymore. We don't know. What we do know is they used the sword to cut Dorman apart and seal it away to 16 pieces, and told everyone not to go here. Ever. We don't know what Dorman is, and given how it speaks in multiple voices, and even before we kill any of the Colossi, there are shadowy people there, and Dorman refers to itself as we a lot. It might be accurate to say Dorman isn't a single entity, but many. Or at least that's what I would say if I didn't find someone who translated the original Japanese dialogue. And it turns out Dorman doesn't refer to itself as we in the original version. It says I, but it's like according to the source, it's like a really archaic way of saying I that isn't used anymore. So it's like a very uncommon way of saying it. But the point is that in the Japanese, it's just referred to as I, it doesn't say we, implying that it might be a singular thing. Of course, it could be a singular thing that's like an amalgam of a bunch of other things, you know, just kind of merged together. But I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. Another thing that's interesting is that instead of Dorman saying we have borrowed the body of this warrior, that's how the English version of the game translates it. Apparently a more accurate translation is I have borrowed the body of a warrior and arise here anew. So kind of the same overall message, but it's just the main difference is the we part. Another thing, while Dorman doesn't tell you at the start of the game what will happen to you if you do what it asks, it does sort of warn you in a vague way by saying the price you pay may be heavy indeed, which is vague and misleading and arguably manipulative. And if you want to say that's a lie by omission, I actually would agree with you, because naturally you would assume it's telling you might be killed by the Colossi for trying this, but since Wander doesn't ask what Dorman means by that, Dorman doesn't even try to elaborate, and there's no guarantee Dorman would have told him exactly what would have happened. But also, let's not forget, Wander never asked Dorman anything about what's going on, so we really don't know if Dorman would have told the truth if we even probed about it. However, if you've read or seen anything with a demonic entity promising a person something, they usually tell them what they want to hear, or they do warn them that there may be a cost for asking the entity to do whatever it is they want. They don't explain the whole cost, and if they do, it's phrased in such a way that it's vague and a person doesn't immediately nope out of there and reject the deal. That could be what they were going for. But there's one other question I want to try to answer here, and that is, what are the Colossi? Because the game doesn't tell you much, aside from that they're the incarnations of the idols, but what I always wondered was, did the Colossi exist before Dorman was split into pieces, or were they formed as a result of whatever ritual split Dorman apart? I lean towards them not existing before Dorman was split, because at the end of the game, Dorman's form has aspects of the Colossi. It also has aspects of the Colossi that didn't make it into the final game. The spidery legs and the small tail growing out the back are cut from the Spider Colossus and another flying Colossus called Rock. My guess is they create the idols, somehow use the sword to separate Dorman, and then infuse the idols and ultimately the Colossi with Dorman's essence. But I checked the wiki, and apparently in the art book, someone from the dev team gave an answer to this. Dorman is a menacing creature who possesses a power beyond the knowledge of humans. In the past, he committed a forbidden act and was sealed away. The ancient land is a place that should be detested, but humans need it. If they destroyed the bridge and completely sealed away the land at the start, none of the events of the game would have happened, but it still exists for that reason. In the beginning, the Colossi were idols, objects of worship. Sacrifices and idolatry are ridiculous, aren't they? I think that's just because they're ancient customs that are passed down through generations. There's no justifiable reason for them. The black bands that pierce Wander's body after defeating a Colossus are symbolic of Dorman's freed power entering Wander. The black shapes surrounding Wander are part of Dorman. The idea was that the Colossi were the bone and muscle that formed his body, and those shadows were the blood that flowed within it. That's why, when they're all united, they become Dorman. The shadows that gaze down upon Wander after defeating a Colossus are saying, "Won't you hurry up?" Even after your body turns turns into Dorman, half of you is still Wander, his consciousness still remains. That's why you can control him. The reason he's so hard to control is because you're only one half. The horns represent elements that couldn't be purified after you're pulled into the spring. That's still Wander even though he's a baby. Keep in mind, I don't know enough Japanese to be able to translate this myself, so if there's anything inaccurate here, I don't know. Sadly, this art book where this interview is sourced from was never released outside of Japan and never got an official translation, which is a shame because I would have bought it. But based on this, maybe the Shrine of Worship wasn't meant to worship Dorman at all, but it was meant to worship the Colossi instead. They mentioned sacrifices, so were people sacrificed to the Colossi, or were they sacrificed to Dorman instead? It's interesting that they say that the Colossi are the bones and muscle, while the shadowy stuff is Dorman's blood. So the Colossi were definitely vessels for Dorman, just like you end up becoming at the end of the game. I don't think this directly answers whether the Colossi always existed or they created after whatever Forbidden Act happened. I'm leaning towards now saying that they existed before that. Maybe Dorman was there first, or maybe they came after him. They also say Dorman is menacing and that it did something forbidden, and we don't know what that is either. Was that bringing someone back to life or something else? I guess we can add this to the things that might indicate that Dorman is evil. But I'm gonna stop here because I want to talk about the development of this game and what was cut. Earlier in development, the game was going to be called Nico, which is supposed to stand for Next Ico, and it was meant to be a sequel. According to the wiki, there was a tech demo at the DICE Summit in 2003 showing a group of masked horn boys riding horses while fighting an early version of one of the Colossi. Fumitsu Ueda said later that they were just using the Ico protagonist, and apparently he never intended to make a direct sequel to Ico. At some point, Ueda had the idea of there being 48 Colossi in the game, which would have been nuts, and even he admitted in an interview that it just was not possible at the time. Actually, at first, there were 48. That was the number I had in the back of my head when I was playing the game. Putting in that many would have been impossible, however, so I cut it down to 24, half the original number. That's when I began actually modeling them and coming up with ways to defeat them. We might have been able to get 24 done within the development period, but it would have been difficult to implement them while maintaining their quality, so we settled on the present 16. Yeah, so there were 8 Colossi that were cut from the game. We do know a little about them, so in no particular order, we're going to go through them all, and we're going to start with Devil. Devil would have been the smallest Colossi, about 4 to 5 meters tall, and would have had bat-like wings. Ueda said that the strategy to beat it was to annoy it with the bow, and it would then, I guess, approach your location and try to seek you out while you hid in the tall grass and snuck up on it and jumped on its back. In the files for the PS3 version of the game, there may have been an object in the arena that Devil's attacks were believed to have interacted with in some way. We don't know much about it, and outside of the grainy images we have to make it look like a cryptid sighting or something, there's not much. In some of the concept art, it actually was gonna have a bow at one point, but looking at the screenshots, I guess that was dropped. We do know where the fight was going to take place. It was going to be at Coordinates D2, at an unused arena that they called the Devil's Plane. Unfortunately, the only remnants of the area in the final game might be a stone staircase and a small pillar that leads absolutely nowhere. Also, there were pillars seen in the arena in the screenshots that got repurposed and moved to the entrance to the cave leading to the ruins where you go to challenge number 14. I do wish Devil made it into the final game. As far as I know, there's not been a reason given for why Devil was cut. Given that he's a small Colossus that could fly, I think he would have been unique and pretty fun. But what do I know? Next up is Griffin. Griffin was estimated to be about 9 meters tall, and despite having wings, it couldn't fly. We actually know quite a bit about them. According to the art book, you were supposed to defeat it by exploiting its weakness to fire. You'd have to fight it while riding aggro. We also know why it was cut because it apparently took too long to retry. It seems to have been cut early in development, but it seems some aspects of it, including its textures, were reworked into the 11th and 14th Colossi. Some of the concept art for it looks really cool to the point where I wish they could have figured out a way for it to work. I'd take it over number 14 any day, that's all I'm saying. Next up is Phoenix. So this one might be the coolest. It's a giant bird that's covered in fire. You were supposed to somehow drop it into a lake to extinguish the flames on it. Some of the files in the game suggest it would attack by creating gusts of wind with its wings. In all the screenshots, it's on the ground, but I'm guessing it could fly to some degree. Its arena was an unused area called Crater, and supposedly it was in Quadrant I-4 at some point. Its test stage, however, was more volcanic, but it later got changed to be the crater. It also seems like the area for Phoenix would have been gigantic because it has 2 start scripts in the files, which could mean that it had 2 entrances that you could use to get to it, and you would get a different cutscene depending on which one you used. There's an unused theme in the soundtrack called Voice of the Earth, and there's evidence to suggest it was meant to be the intro for Phoenix's area. Phoenix had 2 models. The earlier one was much larger, and it had a crazy long neck. It later got reduced in size and seems to have less fur now. According to Ueda, the reason why it was cut was due to the fact that you would lose too much health every time you were knocked off it, and it needed a large environment. Again, shame it didn't make the cut because it certainly has a striking design based on these models and the screenshots we have. Although they likely would have changed its design since the face doesn't have the eyes like the ones in the final game. But next up is Rock, and he's unique because we actually have footage for him. It ain't much, but it's there. You can also see why it got cut because its collision detection seems to have gone haywire there. That's the apparent reason it was cut from the game. Ueda stated in an interview with a French magazine that you needed to chase it with the horse and shoot it down with the bow. And Rock was supposed to be encountered at a massive impact crater, which was at quadrant D6. This was going to be the original version of the Badlands area. Rock seems to have also had a glowing frill, which makes me think that maybe that was a weak point that you were supposed to shoot. When it was cut from the game, Rock's tail was added to Dorman's model, but much of it was cut down in the final version of the game. It's a shame about the collision issues. If that wasn't a problem, I think he would have been fun. Next up is Saru, and we don't have much about this one, because it never made it to the map of the game. Saru, which I'm pretty sure means monkey in Japanese, was some kind of monkey. It seems you were meant to fight it in a cave. The art book states that it hung from the ceiling and somehow you're supposed to drop it to the floor. We don't know how it was supposed to fight, but some think it was going to throw stalactites at you. It seems like that's a common thing with monkeys in video games, they just throw shit at you. In the PlayStation 3 data sheets, it's revealed that Saru had a 246-foot jump. God damn, bro. Likely this would have been used to jump back on the ceiling after being knocked down. We don't know much about Saru as it looks like it was cut very early into the game. But a giant monkey like Colossus clinging to the ceiling would have been cool, especially with the whole 246-foot jump thing. I'm sure a lot of people would have jumped out of their seats seeing that. Next is Sirius, and it looks like an earlier version of the 2 smaller Colossi that did make it into the final game, but looks like you needed aggro to defeat this thing, as she's in the screenshots with it. It kind of looks like a board. It doesn't seem to have any armor on its back. Another strategy to defeat it, the art book seems to give a clue, as it shows a picture of a Stonehenge-like monument, and it's captured saying that this was meant to be used in a fight. So the theory is Sirius would chase the player on horseback and you would have to lure it under the Stonehenge and it would collapse on it. It seems to have been followed at E8. Apparently it was cut due to issues with the method to beat it, but no further explanation was given. I do wonder how this fight would work, because if it managed to hit you, you'd be knocked off the horse and you have to get back on it without it attacking. Maybe it would have hit the player and then run away for a bit and given you time to recover before chasing you again. Or maybe it only got aggressive if you got near it. I don't know. But next is Spider, and I'm not gonna lie, if I could only have one of these, survive into the final game, I think Spider would be my pick just purely off of design because it looks cool. We know the reason why this was cut. The way you're supposed to beat it was you had to slash it with the sword while riding on the horse. This is an action that you can't actually do in the final game, but in earlier demos you could. It seems like it may have been intended to be used on the 9th Colossus at some point, but Ueda said that they had multiple issues implementing this in practice, and they just couldn't make it work during the programming. The art book also says you were supposed to lead it from water to land, and after you damage a certain number of legs, it will keel over in some way that you climb it. There's at least 2 models that we know of that exist for Spider. One being smaller, but it had these long black tentacles on the other side that may have been used to chase and attack the player. We don't really know what those were for, that's just a wild guess. but later it seems to have gotten a much larger model, and it lost the tentacles but gained glowing spikes on its underside, and the game's files suggest that it was able to fire pulses of energy like number 9 at you. Some of the screenshots seem to show it too, like it's charging up an attack or something. I also think there's a sigil at the center of the underside, so I'm guessing it was meant to fall on its side so you can climb up and stab it, because if you're hanging upside down, you're not going to be able to do anything. Some screenshots show Wander standing on top of the Colossus, so maybe it had more than one weak point. Don't know. Either way, visually it's a cool look, and outside of number 13, we don't have a Colossus that feels like a bug. Next one is Worm, and Worm might be the creepiest looking Colossus just based on the screenshot. It doesn't seem to have any eyes, and it's just a giant mouth. It looks like it was able to bend itself in many directions like a worm and was covered in fur from both sides. Some code for it exists in 2 of the demos that does give an idea of how it functioned. Somebody took that code and applied it to the 10th Colossus, and it seems like part of its body would be stationary while the head moves and tracks the player. Another piece of code makes it so the Colossus would always track whatever target was set, which could explain why it's always facing the player in the screenshots. It also seems like it was able to stretch and contract. The only thing we know about how to defeat it is that there was a flower bulb-like section that had a weak point, but because it wasn't shown in the screenshots, a lot of people thought the weak point was somehow in its mouth. But files in the game suggest that there was a base part that may have been under the sand. And there's a texture referencing it, and the name it uses has the word Dodai in it, which means foundation or base. How you were supposed to get to the weak point, we don't know. I wonder if you had to somehow bait it into overextending to try and reach you, and that would force the base to rise out of the sand, so you could then run in and stab it or something. It was supposed to be in an alternate version of G1 in an unused arena called Dune. Nope, not doing that again. I've already made a Dune joke. But this version of the area would have been different because it would have been before the 15th Colossus was moved there. It also has a texture for its idol statue in the game, but outside of that, we don't know much about it. Some people rumored that it was supposed to be the largest boss in the game and it was cut due to needing a huge arena, but no official reason has ever been stated. There was another rumor that was spread because of Dorman's cut introduction line for it, which was mistranslated to say, along with its friend it shakes the earth, and people thought it meant that it was supposed to be fought with the 10th Colossus or in the same area as number 10 after you defeated it. So even claimed the unused piece of music titled Final Battle was meant to be used for this thing and that it was the final boss, but that's not true either, because the art book shows a sketch of what the final boss would have been. We'll get into that in a bit, but based on the screenshots, this thing would have been a panic-inducing nightmare. I do wonder why they cut it, and I wish we did know more about it. So next up is Yamori A. So, Ueda mentioned something about this one in the December 2nd, 2005 edition of Famitsu. He was talking about the 8th Colossus, but said there was another one that was similar to it. We have a picture for the model for it, but Ueda said it was an early screenshot, so it was likely a placeholder. But Ueda said this: "We call it Yamori, but there was actually another Colossus of a similar type. It was a Colossus that chased you while you were climbing the walls, and the strategy to defeat it was to grab onto its back with a backward jump. I figured it'd be pointless to show the same thing twice, so I narrowed it down to one. I won't lie though, the idea of something similar to 8 chasing us up a wall, then we have to jump off the wall and grab onto it, it does sound challenging, and it does sound like it could be pretty intense and visually cool. But I do find the reason it was cut kind of interesting, since 11 and 14 are very similar to one another, and 1, 6, and 15 are also very similar in terms of design. Unfortunately, we don't know much about it, but thanks to some people doing some crazy digging into the files, it lived at an unused area in B3 called Sluice. But beyond that, we don't know anything. But in the art book, it mentions that there were 3 Yamori Colossi. Yamori B became the 8th Colossus that survived until retail, while Yamori A and regular Yamori didn't make the cut. It sounds like the name Yamori A was meant to indicate that it was an earlier version of number 8. But okay, on to the last cut Colossus. So this one was called Evis, and we don't know much about it, only that it was meant to be the final boss. And we only have a single sketch for what it may have looked like. And this sketch likely wasn't the final design they had in mind, as the art book says it's a sketch on when they were coming up with it. It was supposed to be at an area called the Sanctuary, which later became the final arena for number 16. But this one wasn't at F8, it was at I1, and it's supposed to be behind the 15th Colossus' arena. There is path data for it listed in the PS3 data sheets, suggesting that it would walk around, but that's all we really know. What is interesting is its name. It got adopted by the final boss, number 16, that was originally called Buddha, before it got promoted to final boss status. Also, remember how I said the 15th Colossus had a unique music track for the first phase of the fight? Yeah, that music wasn't originally for him. The data file suggests that it and a cut track called Final Battle were meant to play for this scrapped final boss. It's hard to say if I would have preferred this over what we got since there's so little info about it, and I don't even know why it didn't make the cut. And while I am happy with what we got, I'd be lying if I said part of me wouldn't want to see at least one of these fully realized in the game. And I know somebody's gonna be like, dude, that's asking a lot. I know it was kind of a far-fetched hope. But one thing that I would have loved to have seen is if the remake added a mode where you could fight reimagined versions of some of these cut Colossi, but that didn't happen. There are fan projects that are trying to recreate them. One I've been keeping my eye on by following their Twitter account is called Beyond the Forbidden Lands. A few months ago, they announced that they are switching from using a custom engine to instead working in a heavily modded version of the game to try and restore the cut content. They have a Discord, but I haven't checked it out yet. And instead, I've been looking at their Twitter account, and they've got some amazing concept art for their take on the cut Colossi, including some mock-ups for the arenas and test models for the Spider and Sirius. They are taking volunteers, so if you want to help out, I'll link to their Twitter where you can join their Discord. There's another one called the Tribute Project, which has been going on for a long time as far as I know. And for what they've shown, they've got a lot. I've seen videos from years ago, people fighting Phoenix. They posted videos of them with a working version of Worm and an arena for Sirius and other models for cut Colossi. It's really awesome. I'll link their Twitter too if you want to see more. But there's one last thing cut content related that I do want to talk about, and that's the other endings. The game's ending could have been really different. At one point, Ueda came up with the idea that the ending would be slightly different if you had an ICO save file on your memory card, but they decided not to do that as it wouldn't really be fair to do, since people without ICO wouldn't be able to see it, and since Shadow of the Colossus didn't market itself as a sequel or a prequel, players wouldn't have that expectation that they needed to play this other game first, so that wouldn't have been fair. Instead, if you have an ICO save file and start a new game, the diamond on Agro's head will change to the ICO logo. But one idea Ueda did have was that Wander's appearance was going to change even more as you kill the Colossi, that his size would change and the player would grow larger. It sounds like at the end of the game you may have looked really monstrous, but according to the art book, Iman and his people were going to attack Wander, and Mono was supposed to revive and be glowing. They would then attack her, but their weapons would bounce off and fly from their hands, and Iman and his people would have retreated and sealed off the area. The girl wouldn't be able to see, at least not right away, and she would grope around to find Wander, but obviously he would have been different. At the very end, you would have seen the two of them exiting the shrine and supporting one another, and Wander's altered form would have been the price he would have paid to bring her back, and it couldn't have been undone. They would then get on the horse and ride out into the lands, and I don't know, something would have happened. Definitely would have been a happier ending, but I don't know, I think I prefer the more bittersweet one we got in the final game. Another idea they had was when Mono touched Agro at the end, she would see a flashback of the horse's memories of everything we did to bring her back. And I can see why this didn't make it, because it would cause a problem, because Agro wasn't present for all of the fights, so she wouldn't be able to know what happened. So that really wouldn't make any sense. So as far as cut content and different ideas they may have had, that's really everything that I could find. But let's wrap this up, because I got a feeling this video is gonna be long as hell. I would say that this game left quite the impact on people. Because of how mysterious elements in the game are, it drove people to Theorycraft and want to comb through this game to find out if there were some other secrets we may have missed. I remember for a while back when it came out, a lot of people were convinced there was a secret 17th Colossus out there somewhere, and that defeating it would trigger a different ending. And there were so many people online claiming there were ways to do it, or come up with theories on how to get to it. It sort of evolved into an urban legend for a while. Then people started hacking the game and using tools to dig into the files, and sadly, there's no functioning secret Colossus out there. There were a lot of things to be found and uncovered, like an area that became known as the Beta Dam. I don't know if this dam served any real purpose. A lot of people thought it was supposed to be part of an unused arena, but I don't know if it was just like a testing thing or what. But the community around this game is wild, and as I've mentioned, we have fan projects trying to restore cut content, and you have people like Nomad Colossus who have spent years using hacks and exploits to explore and view things we were never meant to see. Some of you were wondering when I was going to bring up Nomad Colossus, weren't you? Don't worry, I wouldn't dream of making a Shadow of the Colossus video without bringing up the GOAT. I'm not kidding, I've watched Nomad on and off again for years now. Might even be over a decade at this point. I mean, this channel's existed since 2008, and it'll be 20 years old in 2 years. Moving on, Nomad has got to be hands down the most beloved member of the fandom, to the point where even the devs of the PS4 remake put a shout out to him and everyone hellbent on uncovering secrets in this game. There is also a secret area in the remake that can only be accessed after collecting 79 gold coins scattered randomly throughout the map. Why 79? What's 7 plus 9? Once you have them all, you can trigger the entrance to a hidden area in the shrine where you'll find a new sword and a broken horn sitting on an altar. I guess the community finally got their one final secret in a way. But the minute stuff came out about cut Colossi in this game, back when the original came out, I went and sought it out and read through it, even though a lot of it was very inaccurate, and I was constantly desperately searching for more. Like, I really wanted to believe there was a way to trigger one of these things in the game, or hack the game to fight them. Even now, and if you can't tell by the length of this video, I'm still just a tad bit obsessed with this game. I honestly should be charging to get rent for how long it's been living in my head, and if any of those fan projects I mentioned are ever completed, I don't think that obsession is ever gonna fully go away. Which is a little bit ironic, because what I took away from this game, especially playing it now, is that it seems like the game might be about letting go. Think about it. The whole plot of the game happens because Wanderer can't let go of Mono being dead. We hang on to these giant monsters as long as we can until we can kill them. At the end of the game, we can hold on to the edge of the pool before we're pulled into the vortex, but ultimately, no matter what we do, we let go. I'm not saying that is the message Ueda intended or anything. I ain't arrogant enough to claim that I know what the artists were intending for the audience to take away from their game. That's just what I took away from it. And even the title of the game has an interesting double meaning if you think about it. So naturally, when you think Shadow of the Colossus, you're thinking of the actual shadow, something gigantic would cast if you were standing near it. But the shadow could also be you, the player, because you're following after them. You're chasing them, you're kind of shadowing them, and you're also killing them. So if you want to get extra pretentious with it, you could probably connect that to being a shadow of death to these things. If you want to go maximum video essayist about it. You know, maybe I should stop writing YouTube scripts late at night, because then I'll just get into just weird, pointless rabbit holes where I'm overthinking and overanalyzing the most minute stuff. But I do think that it's an unforgettable game, and it's a work of art that is both visually incredible and fun to play, even with some jank in the controls. But I don't know, that jank is part of the charm to me. Call it nostalgia or whatever, but I don't mind it. And like I said, in 2018, a full-on remake was released for the PS4 by Bluepoint, with some assistance from Japan Studio that sadly doesn't exist anymore and got merged into one other studio with Sony in April of 2021. So in the time it took for me to get to this part of the edit, it was announced that Bluepoint is shutting down now too. They're apparently shutting down in March, which is only a couple days away at the time I'm recording this. They obviously did the Shadow of the Colossus remake, and they did the Demon Souls one, which I know got a lot of criticism for deviating too far from the original's aesthetic in a lot of places, but I'm still sad to see them go. Not gonna lie, part of me was hoping they were working on an Ico remake or something, but it turns out if this article from PC Gamer is accurate, they were working on a live service God of War game. If there's two things that in my opinion just on paper should not go together, it's God of War and live service. I'm gonna blame some exec at Sony thinking that was a good idea. But the studio, and I didn't even know this until reading this article, it actually got to start in 2008 with remasters of God of War 1 and God of War 2. And I find the timing of this darkly ironic since it was just recently announced that a remake of the OG God of War games is a thing that's in development. And I know this video isn't really about the Bluepoint remake, more so about the original, but the Bluepoint version is a solid game, and while I do prefer the original, the PS4 one is a great game in and of itself. And I feel like their closure is worth mentioning, even though this video is already stupid long as it is. I did warn you all in the beginning, in my defense. So, yeah, RIP Bluepoint. I hope the employees, or I guess former employees, find work at other studios, and maybe they'll, who knows, maybe they'll all come together and become their own little indie studio or something. I don't know, that could be interesting. But yeah, F's in the chat, I guess. Back to the video. But the remake features improved controls and visuals. After the original game, Ueda and a new team developed another game called The Last Guardian. A game that I have not finished yet. I should really get on that. Currently though, Ueda is working on a new game with his own studio that has the working title Project Robot. There was a trailer revealed in 2024 and it seems like it may have some similarities to Shadow of the Colossus because the trailer has a giant robot in it that kind of feels like a Colossus, and the symbols on the character that's climbing the robot look like the ones on Wander's cloak. So maybe if it's implied that they're in the same universe, I don't really know. And I don't think it's ever been confirmed if The Last Guardian is set in the same same universe, but there are some similarities, and some people theorize that they are. No idea though, and I don't know what Project Robot will actually be like or the real title, but since it's funded by Epic Games, I doubt it's ever gonna come to Steam or GOG, which, yeah, that does kinda suck. The trailer does show in the text on the bottom that the footage is captured on PC, so odds are it's using Unreal Engine 5, which means my computer may hate me for trying to run it, but that's really all I can say since we don't know much about this game. To this day, I've yet to see another game quite like Shadow of the Colossus. And you know how Demon Souls and Dark Souls basically launched an entire subgenre of action-adventure games called Souls-likes? Where's the Colossus-likes at? The only game I can think of that fits that description is Pray for the Gods, which I have played it. It was pretty fun. It did do its own spin on things, but it did have some issues. I actually reviewed this game on my other channel a long time ago. Maybe I should do another review of it over here, because I don't think that game got as much attention as it probably should have. Especially since at the time when I did that review, the wiki for the game was incomplete and some of the bosses didn't even have full pages yet. The only other game I can think of that sort of scratches that itch a little bit, this might be stretching it, is Castlevania Lords of Shadow, because there's 3 bosses that are giants. I think they call them Titans in that game. And you have to climb across them and hit these specific like weak points or whatever to defeat them. But that game's not like an open world thing, it's, you know, linear. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but outside of those 2 games, that's the only things I can think of. Maybe I'll make another video on Pray for the Gods on this channel, but that's gonna be a future me's problem. And future me must be absolutely miserable at this point with how much stuff I push onto them instead of just doing it now. So that was the Shadow of the Colossus video. I'm sure you can understand why this video took as long as it did, because oh boy, the script for this thing just keeps getting longer the more I sit here and type this. When I first thought about making a video on this game, I knew it was going to end up being stupid long, because I wanted to get everything I've wanted to say about this game out in one video. So I understand if you guys ain't sitting through this whole thing in one sitting, I would not blame you. If you did do this in one go, thank you, seriously. Let me know what you guys think of this video and the game in general. I'm going to cover Doom 64 next, and hopefully I'll have that done before March, because I may have an idea for what I want to do for March that could be really fun. Thank you all for watching and putting up with the lack of uploads for a while. I'm going to try and prevent that from happening again. For now, I'm going to go nap because this project is finally done. Hey, I just wanted to again say thank you for making it to the end of this video. I'm in disbelief that it's finally done now, because this thing was a colossal project, pun 1000% intended. I started work on this back in mid-November of 2025. Specifically, I started working on the character models using the animations at the beginning. Then I went about playing the game again and collecting footage and then writing a script, and I kid you not, the script for this video is 44 pages, not including this little section I'm reading off right here at the end. I don't even know how many hours I spent on this as of right now. Yeah, I don't think I'm going this hard again for a gaming retrospective for a while. This is one of my favorite games of all time, so it felt appropriate to go big for this one. The Doom 64 video will be up sometime in March. I am going to scale these back a bit to about 30 to 45 minutes going forward, unless it's a big game, or it's a special occasion, or it's a special game to me. Other videos will be out soon. I'm going to be making some more about my book. You can also expect a breakdown of the opening animation that will likely include a time lapse of me making the model for the Colossus that I've just jokingly dubbed as Rudolph because he looks like a deer, and a friend of mine called him Rudolph the Nightmare Reindeer when I showed him a work in progress version, and it's funny to me. If any of that or this video interested you at all, please consider subbing and liking and commenting so YouTube actually counts your view. For now, I'm gonna go crash. I can feel the exhaustion from the countless hours I spent editing this late at night catching up to me. Y'all have a good one. Thank you all for watching.